Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, I will finally be revealing my favorite Boomkin build for PvP. And I really like this one. I've always loved the Starfall build. I've constantly tried to find a position for it to work in any given meta, in any given patch, because I love that AoE damage, triple spread pressure type of blasting damage. So here we're going to be playing it. I'll have it linked in the description down below and going through our thoughts on what it is that we're trying to do with this build specifically. So we're facing probably one of the most meta compositions in the game right now: Subtlety Rogue, Discipline Priest, and Frost Mage from one of the highest rated ladder teams playing it. So this is going to be the ultimate test of what can this build do. So I see my teammates in CC, so I'm going to rake stun the Rogue to prevent their connection, and then solar beam the Priest, and then try and bash the Mage. This way I've CC'd all three enemy targets in their opener, which is the scariest moment in the game. I then go for Cyclones to tank interrupts, because my build focuses around spamming Moonfire and Starfall, so you care a lot less about actually getting kicked on Cyclone, although the enemies do really need to still stop it. Now we're locked in stun locks, but our healer is coming out of CC, so we're holding our Barkskin for a second here. I don't really want to use Barkskin unless I'm actually like at a full stun in danger of dying, so we'll use Renewal instead to get some instant recovery, Typhoon the Rogue away, and start kiting towards the pillar to line of sight the Mage until my Shaman is out of CC. Main thing against our Rogue teams is survive the opener. After you survive the opener, then we can start talking about doing the damage. So I'm getting Sunfires out, and that's because Treants will apply Moonfire for you. This will save you some globals on this build. Then we're going to press Incarnation, and we're just going to mash Starfall. We got Trents and Fury of Elune down before this, and we will just keep spamming Starfall, and we're trying to get Starfall to as many stacks as possible because it hits harder the higher you get the stacks. You should be able to get this to 8 stacks ideally, but you still need to be a little bit worried about, dying at the same time. You can see my Warlock getting pretty low in this position. I could have used Fairy Swarm onto the Rogue here. I use it now as the full sheep lands, and what's nice about this is if you combine it with an Affliction Lock, you get nice dispel protection, and I play Dying Stars, so you want to dot healers, make sure you're applying like Roots and Fairy Swarms to bait dispels from enemy healers, so they proc the Dying Stars, they proc an Unstable Affliction, silence on themselves, and they take more dot damage redirected to them as well. You can see the Priest now rotting to like 50% health as we've cloned the Mage. You do kind of want to sparingly use Cyclone just because you want, obviously, the dot damage to be ticking on as many people as possible. But with RMP particularly, you're probably going to have to use it just to try and discoordinate their go. Here, Shadow Dance is popped. This is a big moment for the Rogue to do a lot of damage. So try to go for a Cyclone. We get counterspelled on it. I could use like a Shadow Meld Rake Stun here in order to stun lock an enemy and try and prevent them from connecting any further damage. But our Warlock has also used Shield Wall. So we're going to go for a Cyclone on the Priest at low health. We've got both DPS at about 80% health. We're going to get into Eclipse with the 2 Wrath casts and start spamming out some Starfalls and dishing out some more AoE. We use the Fairy Swarm on the Rogue as our Warlock is still pretty low in this position. And we've got our Solar Beam coming off cooldown pretty soon. So we're going to Cyclone the Priest, try and stall their recovery as much as possible, try and find this Rogue out of stealth who's now behind the pillar. We're going to go for the Solar Beam on the Priest. I can also Stampede my team here. I don't know if I actually do in the VOD itself, but Stampeding your team when they're running away. Love this type of thing. Stun, silence a Priest. This way they can't use paint suppression. You can get a lot of damage. This build focuses heavily around making sure that you're swapping to healers and trying to spread your damage onto as many targets as possible that way. If you're not attacking the healer, it's going to be difficult to actually get pressure going onto the DPS members as well. But we've got our Force of Nature, so we really want to try and get into Eclipse. We've got our Sunfires up, we've got our Moonfires up. We need to get into Eclipse ideally before popping Incarn, so we're using our instant Starfire procs here and casting Starfire because they probably won't kick it. They want to kick Cyclone. That gets us into Eclipse. We pop the Force of Nature, and as soon as we're out of these stuns, we're just going to mash Starfall. So dots are up, Trents are out, we're in Eclipse, mash Starfall, get as many of these as you can. When you don't have Incarnation, you're probably only going to cap out at like 4 or 5. This build really focuses heavily around like the Incarn window being that big bursty moment where you're going to be able to actually overwhelm your enemies. But you can see the Priest has Dying Stars from dispelling some crowd control effects, so we need to get the dots back onto the Priest as soon as possible. We're going to disengage away for a moment here, but honestly I could have probably just kept pushing in on top of them. They're really pressured at this point in time. I'm going to Stampede the team whenever you want to make a push. Stampede, we got our Shaman playing Windrush Totem. I'm going to root the enemy attackers. Nice little trick with Mass Entangle is you want Mass Entangle Solar Beam, and then 30 seconds later you can just press your root on anybody because it'll be back up for your Solar Beam. So right here we're just tossing a root to try and hold them in place for us to be able to catch up to them. They go for a defensive blind. which honestly isn't a bad idea to try and slow down Starfall damage, is just CC the Boomkin and take them out of the game. But they're still rotting to dots. We're still kind of slowly marching ahead to victory. Remember, this is one of the best teams in the game. Playing this build at lower ratings, you'll absolutely crush people almost immediately. I might even include a clip of it at the end of this video just to show you how powerful it can be. They're swapping to our Shaman really heavily here, and there's a Cloak of Shadows. So really my only option is maybe try and cycle in the Mage or toss out some regrowths. And I will almost always do this if they're sending big damage onto my healer and they're like below 50% health. Cyclone and off heals, that's when you're going to need to be focusing on it. You don't really care about doing a huge amount of damage outside of your Force of Nature window anyway. So our Force of Nature is coming up in 13 seconds. So using this time just to recover, stabilize, make sure that we're doing all right, then get our dots up, then start getting our Starfalls rolling, then start working towards getting into Eclipse. And obviously you're still going to be summoning in the Star Burst as well with the PvP talents that I'm running. So having a Starfall ticking in the in-between just to try and proc these Starbursts onto enemies is just going to be a really good idea. We got Fury of Elune, we're into Eclipse, we're spamming Starfalls, our Force of Natures are ramping up. This is going to really enable us to do a lot of damage. So we're at about half Astral Power, 2 Starfalls. In Eclipse, we're going to be able to get a ton of damage. And now the enemy healer has Rapture, and this is probably one of the most powerful cooldowns in the game. I see a Kidney Shot, so we're going to disarm the Rogue. Again, if this gets dispelled, Priest takes a risk at hitting a UA, and they're going to apply Dying Stars to themselves and start taking more damage themselves. We bash the Dispel as I see my Shaman in a Polymorph, so the Rogue likely wants to set up some damage here. So we're trying to just keep a little bit of distance from the Rogue. We'll use a Root, 30 seconds in between our Solar Beam combo. This is preventing the Rogue from getting to me, just delaying it as much as possible because my Shaman is still in CC. And then the Mage just popped our Comet Storm here, so we're just going to disengage away from that and avoid that AoE coming down on the ground. Shadow Meld, Rake Stun the Rogue, and we just totally negate that setup by just keeping our distance from the Rogue, pushing them away with Roots and Typhoons, and CCing them with Disarms and Bash on Dispel. And now you can see the Priest is really falling behind, even despite the Rapture. So we're starting to develop a lot of pressure. We're going to Stampede the team again. I love playing the 1 minute cooldown Stampede for these reasons, because sometimes it can be difficult to get on top of your opponents in order to actually finish the game with this build. So the 1 minute cooldown Stampede really enables you to actually get there. We cycle on the Rogue to stop them from really, stopping our advance here. And we're just getting a ton of damage going onto the Priest, ton of damage going onto the Mage. Rogue might re-stealth out of the clone, which is the only kind of danger with this. Actually just decides to Shadow Step in. There's the Shadow Dance, so we want to disarm that as soon as possible. And you can Solar Beam the healer. I should honestly Solar Beam the healer with the disarm here. I did it a second too late, but actually I ended up rooting the Rogue anyways on the Dispel. So even though the disarm's not there, the Rogue is rooted because he was standing next to the Priest. And then that way he can't connect with any of the Shadow Dance. Mage is still rotting. Priest is still dying to dots in the Solar Beam. We're going to pop Fury of Elune, start ramping up towards our Trent window, which is coming up in about 8 seconds. This is the big window where you want to make sure that you're connecting as much damage as possible. We've already got 3 Starfalls rolling. We've already worked through Greater Invis. You can see all 3 targets now getting to like 50% health. Desperate Prayer is about to end. We get the stun onto the Priest. Really like the stuns going into Priest specifically when you can, although I do save Bash, I would say, typically to peel for the Rogue during the setup, during the dances, and during the stuns, just to guarantee you have something to buffer the damage. But now Trents are down, Starfall is rolling, and pretty much at this point it's going to be completely unrecoverable. We drop the Mage. Shortly after, likely going to be dropping the Priest. You can see between the Warlock and myself, even with how much crowd control the Rogue Mage Priest was pumping out, we're still able to get very substantial numbers. So I have really been enjoying this build. Again, it's going to be linked in the description down below. I just wanted to give you guys this video highlight. I'll probably give like a more in detailed guide, obviously, for Balanced Druid, my thoughts about like embellishments and stats and all that stuff going forward. But I know a lot of you guys are just immediately asking like, what are the talents? What are the build? What can it do? And that's kind of the main focus of this build while I work on that more detailed guide for the future. So thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.